Hey, beautiful. I am so glad that you're here. Welcome to Inside the Apothecary, a space for real conversations about hormones, fertility, and the body. Because your body isn't broken, it's communicating. So take a breath, get comfortable, and let's tune back into you.
Welcome to episode 4 of Inside the Apothecary. Today we're talking all things hormone. We're going to explain what is an actual regular normal menstrual cycle, how does it work, what is normal, what is not normal, what are some of the signs that your cycle is out of balance, and why do we consider the period the fifth vital sign? We're going to be going through different reproductive disorders. We're going to be going through things that impact your menstrual cycle, everything in between. It's going to be a big one. And we are very excited because this is a topic very close and dear to our hearts. So my name is Jamie and I am joined with the beautiful Mel here today from Inside the Apothecary. So, Mel, I know, what a big one. All right. So why don't you break us down and give us a rundown of the basics of the menstrual cycle? Because I really think there are many women that don't quite understand how their body works. And this is important.
Well, when we first see someone, I say, hey, how's your period? How's your cycle? How many days is your menstrual cycle? And they'll go, I bleed for 4 days. I bleed for 5 days. No. Do you know how much? Because the menstrual cycle is always happening, when we're reproductively fertile. So from the first time we have our period, when we are in puberty, when we're going through that, 11, 12, 13, sometimes maybe 14, but normally a little bit earlier these days. That is the start of our menstrual cycle. And obviously we have a monthly bleed, roughly monthly bleed, until we go through the transition, which is menopause, where we detox our estrogen and we no longer are reproductively vital. That sounds a bit shit, but menopause has also got its pros. We'll do another episode on that. So we go through this cycle every single month and it has different phases. It almost, feeds on itself. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then, maybe phase 4 would be the bleed. And then it goes back to the start. And at each of those phases, we do different things. Our hormones are doing different things, and we ideally are feeling well in all phases, and it's feeding into that beautiful bleed. The normal time frame for this is anywhere between 21 days, which obviously is on the shorter end of the cycle. And we do try and pull it out to a nice, 25 to 28 days, all the way through to 31, 32 days, I would say is fairly normal. And I would consider that normal when we see it. I don't know. Would you say that a cycle should be a specific amount of days? I feel like there's a lot of leeway.
I think it's not so much that it should be a specific amount of days. It's that every month it should be the same amount of days.
Yeah.
So there are some women that will consistently have a 25-day cycle or a 28-day cycle or a 30-day cycle. But I think if you start going 21 days one month, 31 days the next month, 25 days, and you start hopping around like that, that's probably a sign that there's some type of hormonal imbalance is beginning, potentially happening. Right. So it's the consistency.
Yeah, I like that. That's because I'm saying you have a 21 to 35 day cycle, but yes, we want to see that is consistent every single cycle.
Yes.
And then in your bleed phase, we want to see you kind of bleeding for no more than 5 days. I think anything over 5 days is just a drag. I don't like it. I don't want that for my women.
No, and I don't
nice,
think
clean, tight window
doesn't need to be necessary either. So I think it's just really important to understand that when we're counting a menstrual cycle with days, day 1 of your menstrual cycle is the first day you bleed properly. Right. So if you spot into your period for a few days, that's not day 1. Day 1 is the day you properly bleed. Right. Then we count until the day before your next day 1. Right. So that's the full length of your menstrual cycle. That's what we're talking about here. So not like Mel said, it's not the amount of days that you bleed per month. Right.
You go. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, back on that regularity aspect, I kind of want to see that you also bleed for the same amount of time each month, roughly.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing, right? So our body is a bit like a clock, right? And like we said in our last episode, there's lots of different clocks, lots of different rhythms, and you want to see that your body is roughly behaving the same each month also.
Because it's a cyclic. thing. We
Mm-hmm.
want each phase to be really beautiful and the same amount and then flow into the next one. And then you have that nice tight, I don't want to see any spotting. We talk about what's normal,
Mm,
what's not. I don't think spotting
mm-hmm.
is normal. I think I want to get rid of
Mm,
that. I want to see a nice tight, clean bleed window. And then you go into that next phase of your cycle, which will include ovulation. And to get that beautiful, the biggest ovulation window in terms of like if we're talking fertility for a second, the whole cycle needs to be consistent, regular, you
yeah.
know, no spotting, no pain, like all of those symptoms. I want to see them gone because they all will reflect on your ovulation window and affect it.
Mm. And so this is where I think it's really good to touch on the fact that we consider your period to be like that fifth vital sign. So do you want to talk a bit about that, Mel? Because I think this is just such a cool, I love when they first started
Yeah.
talking about this because I was
There's
like,
a book.
yes,
There's an
yeah.
awesome book. And I actually, this isn't my first rodeo in terms of podcasting. Little name drop. I did do a podcast previously called The Naked Naturopath, and I had the author
Mm-hmm.
of that book on there a number of times. So
Oh my
Lisa
God, did
Hendrickson Jack.
you?
Yeah. She
Ah,
wrote The Fifth Vital
amazing.
Sign. So awesome book. Highly recommend you read
Mm,
it if you want to know more about how a cycle can
mm,
direct our health
yeah.
in general. And so your vital signs are like your blood pressure, they're your your
Temperature.
pulse and temperature and
Mm-hmm.
one for women, we've called your cycle the fifth vital sign because
Mm-hmm.
it does reflect your inner health. If
Mm,
you have pain, we see that as a symptom. It's not
mm,
like it's very common. I'm not saying that these things aren't common, but they're not normal and they do
yes.
reflect an issue. So we
Mm-hmm.
want to fix it. We want to regulate the
Mm.
cycle so there is no spotting, there is no
I
pain.
think I really love the idea. Same as like Lara Bryden also had another book called The Period Repair Manual, which is another
Yeah.
really great read if you're wanting to start learning a bit more about your menstrual cycle. And she called it the same sort of similar thing, but like your monthly report card. Right. So I think it's
Yeah.
really important, right? Let's just bring it back and talk about
Mm.
what should a period actually be like? Right? What should it be
I
like?
think
Right? Because then we can go into dysfunction. But I just want to paint the picture of what's possible, what we want to aim for.
I actually love for my women to not know their period's coming.
I I know, I love it for it to be a surprise as well. I say that all the time. You
Surprise
should be like,
period.
"Oh, I got my period." That's what it should be
Not
like.
know when they're ovulating. I don't want ovulation pain. I don't want any kind of lead in. I don't want them to be PMSy or, moody or
Mhm.
anything. Oh my gosh, I've had my beautiful, wonderful, perfect bleed is here. And I didn't even know.
Yes.
Like a gift. That's what I want for my
I
women.
always say to my clients, there shouldn't be drama. So I'm
Mhm.
like, if you're feeling like a raging psycho, drama. If you're getting so bloated and your boobs are really swollen, drama.
Mhm.
You're
If
like,
you bleeding, like flooding out of nowhere, clots, heavy
drama, drama,
pain. Yeah, no. We
drama,
want like a
right?
nice romantic novel, something you can really settle down
100%.
with. It's
Because
just
you know what?
enjoyable.
If we're going to bleed every single month, it shouldn't be that big a deal. You should be like, oh, I
Yeah.
got my period and go on with your day.
Yeah.
It
Our bodies
shouldn't
are made
stop
to do
you
this.
in it shouldn't stop you in your tracks and make you bedbound and make you have time off work. That, my dears, is not normal.
And you
Right?
and I
And
both have endometriosis.
yes,
We
we
are
do.
fully aware that
Mm,
these periods, like the reason we want it for you is because we fully understand what it's like not to have it.
yeah,
So we're not saying you're
100%.
doing anything wrong. We're just saying we want to make it awesome. We want to make it
Mm,
lovely for you. So
yeah,
regularity, consistency, no signs or symptoms really.
yes.
Yes, you can know when it's going to come for sure. Like you can, that's fine. But that's different to having like warning signs.
Mhm. For sure, especially when it starts interrupting with your life.
Mm.
Percent,
Yeah.
right? Like
And
that is definitely not normal.
quality of life will definitely be reduced with a lot of
Mm,
those symptoms that we're talking about. So,
yeah.
yes, a good period, the ghost period, the phantom period, the good
Mm,
period, not
mm-hmm.
that common in our work.
Totally. And that's sad, honestly. And what really annoys me is like so many women come and see us, right? And they're like, I don't know if you can help me, like as naturopaths, you're like, well, I don't know what that could possibly be because honestly, like we see everything.
Yeah.
And, I'm expecting it to be something super crazy and super complex and whatever.
Mhm.
And they're like, I have really heavy periods or I have really painful periods. And I'm like, girl, like you are in the right place. This is our bread and butter. We got you. It's all
Yeah.
good. This is honestly the part that really makes me so sad is because so many women have suffered for so long and the doctors have just told them, go on the pill. Like that's the answer. Whereas if doctors tell you that, I am literally like, welcome to our giant dispensary of everything we have to help support you. And we'll touch
Yeah.
on that more. But like, I just want to put it out there, firstly, very early on, that there is absolutely hope. And absolutely, your body wants to be back in balance. Your body
Yep.
wants to produce these beautiful periods. And so many of my clients, I've honestly lost amount of times people have said to me, I didn't know my period could be like this. Once they've started us on the protocol, I put them on. Oh, I didn't know. You mean like there was no, and I'm like, yeah, I know, it's great.
I love it when a patient is like, "Oh, Mel, it's urgent. I didn't get any ovulation pain. I'm not ovulating." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. That's good. That's ideal. That
That's
doesn't
what
mean
I
you're
was
not
trying to do.
ovulating." Yeah, it means we've reduced all that repro inflammation that you were feeling. Like
Uh,
it's a good thing. Or Mel, I didn't have any pain and my period just came out of nowhere, and it like I was like, "What?" There's no warning. And like, yeah, I get that that's like a bit stressful if you've always had
I know,
plenty
and
of
it's
warning,
so
but
weird.
I'm like, "Yay." Inside, I'm so
I
happy.
know.
Yeah.
Happy
So
dance, happy
ideal.
dance.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what are some things that could throw our cycle out of balance, right?
Oh
Because
my
like we
gosh.
said, this is something that moves,
Mhm.
right? And our body is constantly like moving and changing. So
Yeah.
whilst being in a regular cycle it can mean your hormones are in balance, it
Mhm.
also doesn't necessarily take much to throw us out of balance, right? So
We
what
have
would you say are some of the big things you see, Mel?
life. Life can throw us out of balance. No, but, I will often my patients will say, like, "My period was going really well, like, everything was great. Well, we got rid of this, that, but I had a cold or flu, and then my period was a bit late or a bit painful or something." So, infections, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Our immune system's, related to our hormonal kind of
Mm-hmm.
balance.
And
Stress.
just on that,
Oh,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
on elaborating the immune system, one thing I think is really interesting is your immune system will dip just before your period. So you are more likely to also get sick just before your period.
Mhm.
So again, like Mel was saying, really intertwined. Big one.
Yep.
Absolutely. And fascinating also. You were saying stress?
Stress. So if you have a more
Mm,
stressful month, that may be reflected in inflammation in your bleed.
mm,
So you could
mhm.
have a more painful period.
And you know what I think is really funny? Oh, you know what we didn't touch on? Let's just circle back to the beginning.
Mhm.
Well, our periods, our hormones, were on a 3-month cycle,
Yes.
right? Because that's the life cycle of your egg is 3 months, right? So let's just strip it back because I just want to make sure we're really clear on this,
Yep.
right? So you have your menstrual cycle, which is the start of your menstrual cycle, is when you bleed, right? Then the first half of your cycle up until when you ovulate, that's the follicular phase. Then you have ovulation, which should be in the middle. And then you have the luteal phase, which is then the last bit before you bleed again,
Bleed.
right? So that's when you then bleed. So that's the entire length of your menstrual cycle. But we are on this 90-day overall kind of cycle, right? So often, if you're, say what Mel was saying, right? So yes, if you're stressed, that next period might be more heavy or more painful. But I often say to my clients, if that particular period that they're having right now is really crazy, it's actually quite often a reflection of what happened 3 months ago.
They've been
And
storing it up.
that's what people don't realize. So
Mm.
I think it's so funny. I talk to my clients in January, February, March every year. And I'm like, hey, heads up, your next period might be a bit more crazy, hectic. And I say this in December, I start warning them. I'm like, don't be scared if it's crazier because during Christmas and like November,
Yeah.
December, people are more stressed. They're not eating in patterns. They're eating more, drinking more, partying more, all the fun stuff, but often a lot of stress. And so,
Yeah.
therefore, 3 months later, it's often not a fun story. And that's
Mm.
okay. It comes back, but it's really common, right? So, again, like we were saying, it's often not like what happened right now, but it can be what happened 3 months ago. I have a
Yeah.
really good example of this, which I think is just a perfect way to kind of illustrate this. One
Mm.
of my clients booked in a consultation with me and she was like, look, I am so in touch with my body and understanding my hormones, but I've noticed something's getting off in the last couple of months. And I'm
Mm.
like, interesting. Okay. She's like, it's starting to get weird. I'm like, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So we're going
I'm
through it.
interested.
And then I was like, okay, so when did this start going weird? And she goes, that was 2 months ago. And I said, okay, what was happening 5 months ago? Right? Because from the 2 months when it started going weird, I want to know what was happening 3 months before that.
Mhm.
And she goes, right. So she said, my brother was in a very serious car accident. He was in ICU. We didn't think he was going to make it. I wasn't eating. I was stressed out of my mind. And I said, there it is. So I said, that's okay. I'll put you on herbs to get your hormones back in balance. And then sure enough, her periods disappeared because I said, this is because of what happened. It's okay. And her periods end up disappearing for 5 months.
Yeah,
So I had
wow.
her on the herbs and she was like, is this still because of what happened? I said, yes. I said, we just need to just keep going, keep supporting
Mm,
you. They'll come back, but this is why.
mm,
And it just showed how the impact of such a big stress can have downtrack like later on.
definitely. So, did she get her bleed back?
Yeah, she did. It did. But like I kind of think of it sometimes like that in those cases. When I give you guys the herbs, I always think it's kind of like the herbs is like planting the seed. In the beginning,
Mm,
it's all the little roots that start growing and you don't see it, but then eventually a little period will sprout up again and it's fine. And so we got her back,
yeah,
but it does take some time and we see that, right? And so this is where this is quite an extreme example of an extreme shock, but this
yeah.
is where the reality of that nervous system stress and the
Mhm.
impact it can have like on your in terms of like that regularity of your menstrual cycle. Because let's just also talk about, sorry, I also just while I'm thinking
You're
about it,
excited. It's good.
last episode, if you didn't
Yeah.
catch, we were talking about the nervous system, right? And
Mhm.
we were talking about fight or flight. Now, what we didn't mention, I just realized, is when you're in that fight or flight, you switch off reproduction because you're
Yeah.
giving the body now is not the time to conceive. And this is huge, right? So
So
when you're
that's
in and you're really stressed, right, that's where you won't have a period because your body goes, right now is not a safe, nurtured place to have a period.
yeah. Or you may have a period, but the rest of the cycle might be a bit out of whack. You're not ovulating very well. It
Mm,
does affect fertility overall. It's
yeah.
going to lessen your chances of conception. There's all different types of stress. And,
Mm,
since we've talking about it, the stress on your body from under eating, that
mm.
will affect your period.
And
The
over
stress
exercising.
on your body from overexercising
Mm,
will affect your
mhm.
period.
Yeah,
So there's, in terms of that, looking at the symptoms from
yeah,
previously, often my patients will be like, I've had a really bad couple of weeks, couple of months with my diet. I've been drinking too much, like you said, over Christmas. I've been eating things I don't normally eat. I've
yeah.
been, doing all of that. And they will
Mm,
have period symptoms because of
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
ideally, we don't want any period symptoms, like none.
No,
So
no.
anything like that, like speaking of what can affect it, so many different things. But basically,
Yeah,
I'm just going to go back to my life.
yeah,
Life
for
can
sure.
affect it.
But that's where, like, I really love the analogy that your period is your monthly report
Mm,
card. So if you get a period that is a bit funky, right, that
mm,
is more painful or a bit heavier than what you're used to, you should be like, hang on,
mm.
something's going on in my body, something. Use this as your red flag to kind of look at what's going on in your
Yeah.
life, in your stress, with your nervous system, what you're eating. Have a look at what's going on and kind of think what's been different for me over the past few months? What's changed?
Or the consistency. If it comes too early, it comes
Mm,
too late, like something,
yeah.
something's happened.
Mm,
We see that
mhm,
as you go through menopause, the periods will become closer, they'll get heavier, they become
yeah.
further apart. Like they do weird and wonderful
Mm,
stuff. And that's because of
mm,
those hormonal changes. But
yeah.
ideally, when you're pre menopausal, ideally, we don't have those changes happening. So we want that beautiful rhythmic consistency.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So they're the things that can kind of throw our cycle out.
Yes.
We haven't spoken about, like they're kind of all life. Repro disorder
Yes.
is a big one. So, you can be doing all of these things we're talking about, but you have PCOS, you have endometriosis, you might have adenomyosis.
Mhm.
That is going to make things a little bit harder. It is
Yeah.
going to, we've got those chronic kind of diseases essentially. What are we primarily looking at with those kind of hormonal repro disorders? What happens to the period?
So that's such a big topic, right? So it really
We
depends
will
on which
start
one we're sort of talking about. So
PCOS first.
think with anything, right, I just want to say, I think it's really important to understand that I've said this before and I'll say it again because I think it's really important. You can have endo, but you can also have your periods and your hormones all out of balance. You
Mhm.
can have two things at the same time,
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
right? And I think it's really important to understand that, right? Because I think so often we just think, well, because I've got endo, that means everything. That the only way for me to get any type of symptomatic relief is only through surgery, for example.
Mm,
And whilst, yes, it might be important to remove the endo, you could also have all of your hormones really out of balance, which is driving a lot of pain, inflammation, heavy bleeding, irregular cycles, or whatever it might be.
yeah.
But that can also be happening at the same time. And often by addressing all that hormonal stuff, you can actually get so much in the way of symptomatic relief that can be gained not just from surgery alone. So you can have those two things happening at the same time. And so I think it's really important to
Mm.
talk about that
Well, let's add a third thing in, just for fun.
just for fun.
Inflammation. So if we're looking at root causes, you can treat that inflammation. And again, we get a really
Mm,
nice symptomatic relief from treating a root, systemic inflammation, repro inflammation that drives endo
yeah.
as well. I
Yeah.
think if I don't know where you're going, but a lot of women don't realize that those reproductive disorders have different symptoms and different symptom pictures. And I totally understand the hormonal driving, and each of those disorders will have different hormonal drivers, as
Mm,
we know. But even if we just give our listeners a bit of an idea, because I have so many women come, they're like, I think I have PCOS, I'm having these really heavy, painful bleeds. I'm
mhm,
like, well, maybe, but
mm. I think
that's not the
we
common
need
picture.
to, yeah, if we're going to talk about PCOS, like, so there's been talk recently they're going to rename it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because the name of PCOS is terrible in my
Misleading.
mind, incredibly misleading, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to kind of talk a bit about that. God, we could do a whole episode on PCOS. We may have to come back and do a
We may,
whole,
but,
we
if
may.
we just
We're
give
going to
them an
just,
idea in terms of
yeah,
our hormones and menstrual cycle episode,
yeah.
I think
So
that would be helpful for our
with
peeps.
PCOS, right? The polycystic ovaries, the presence of polycystic ovaries does not necessarily mean you have PCOS.
Mhm.
And just because they have seen on a scan at some point that you have polycystic ovaries does not mean they are always going to be polycystic ovaries. That
Yes.
can chop and change each month, right? And so that is quite fluid, right? This is why they're wanting to change the name because that's not indicative of what's going on,
Yep.
So with whenever someone says to me they have PCOS, I'm like, what type of PCOS do you have? So what are some of the types, Mel, that people need to have for them to be classified as PCOS?
You mean the symptom picture?
Well,
Yeah. So
also like the
generally,
hormonal stuff, right?
yeah, what we would see is a high amount of our male testosterone and
Mm-hmm.
androgens, a
Mm-hmm.
lowered amount of our female sex hormones. We would see
Mm-hmm.
amenorrhea, which is an absence of periods because
Mm,
the male sex hormones are higher than the female, so often there's no bleed. So some women will be like, I have 80-day cycles.
mm,
That would be their normal or
mm-hmm.
longer. We would also then what we don't want to see, but what we often see is a metabolic involvement. So we've got the
Mm,
hormonal picture and then we've got
mm-hmm.
metabolic involvement, which
Yeah.
would present as insulin resistance, high
Mm-hmm.
predisposition to type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Weight is often a concern, and hirsutism, which is hair growth because of those
Yeah.
male hormones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So it's a big one.
yeah, you can have PCO without the
Mm,
S. You can
yeah.
have the syndrome and then
Mm,
the cysts go away. You can also have cysts with endo. So my understanding of PCOS now is that they're looking for that high amount of empty follicles versus just looking at cysts, which is
mm,
what they should be doing as far as I
mm.
understand it, um, as well as the metabolic stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And this is where what really, really frustrates me is when I have a lovely woman come and see me and she says, I have PCOS. And I go, okay, like, what's type PCOS? What type is it? And she goes, I have no idea. Like, well, how do you know you have PCOS? And she said, because I was 16, I got an ultrasound that said I had polycystic ovaries. So I have
Yeah.
PCOS and I've been told it's going to be hard for me to conceive. They
Yeah.
put me on the pill. And, now I'm 28. I've
Mm.
just always known I've got PCOS. And it's not the clear picture.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not.
pretty rare that I'd actually see testosterone and androgens tested,
Yes.
even though they've
Agreed.
been diagnosed or told they have it. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, like you and I, well, we're doing a lot of fertility work. So what we often see with polycystic ovarian syndrome is no ovulation, no cycle,
Mm,
no bleed, no
mhm.
ovulation.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would mean that we have a high AMH, which is our anti-malarial hormone, and
Mhm.
that becomes a huge issue in fertility because a high AMH, it's pathological. It means that you've got this massive amount of eggs because they've never been released.
Mm,
And that puts a lot of pressure on your body. You then have like a quantity over quality issue, and the eggs aren't
mhm.
very healthy or robust.
Yeah.
So all of
Also
these
not
things
good.
can be looked at and tested, and they're often
Mm.
not. So it will be great to have a new
I
name and some new parameters to diagnose that.
Absolutely. But, I often say to my clients, I don't need your diagnosis. What I'm just trying to figure out
Yeah.
is what's out
Give
of
me
balance with you.
give me what's going on. Tell me about you.
Like, so, okay, is it that you've got high testosterone? All right, let's work about bringing that down. Is it that your hormones are out of balance or, like we said, you're not ovulating or you're not having a
Mm,
regular period?
mm,
All right, let's work on that. If there's issues with insulin resistance, like, let's work on each of those
mhm,
and bring it back. Because
uh-huh.
also, I really just want to say with PCOS, just because you have PCOS doesn't mean you've got it forever.
No, we fix it.
It doesn't mean
We
you've got it
we
forever.
fix that
And
thing.
we bring you back. And
Yeah.
it just breaks my heart when so many women feel like they've been like this forever. They think they're going
Mhm,
to be like this forever. And again, they've been told it's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, for you to conceive. And so,
mhm.
therefore, you're going to have to do IVF when you want to try. And that is just horrible news to hear for a woman.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Also really frustrating because, like, if we look at the starting points of that IVF journey, ovulation induction it doesn't work that well when there's been a history of like chronic amenorrhea and the eggs still might not be released. So it doesn't
Mm,
necessarily, like, the rates are pretty low. And then if we are going to go for full blown IVF, we still need those eggs, and those eggs aren't going to be very happy. So we still, yeah, there's lots to consider there. But I
mm,
think it's good to touch on all that because, like, the first thing that we are asking these women is, what's your period like? What's your cycle like? Do you know what I mean? We're coming back to that menstrual
mm,
regularity, that menstrual cycle. Do you have hormonal symptoms? Do you have ovulation
mm.
symptoms? Like, we want to know all
Yeah.
those details because, like you said, yes, the diagnosis doesn't matter to us, but it does matter to a lot of women. And they do identify with their repro disorder a lot of the time. Like, I'm an
Yeah.
endo warrior through and through. Do you know what I mean? Even if I don't currently have endometriosis, which I may or may not, because we get it cleaned up and whatnot. We always still do. And we're always going to identify that way. So yeah, I guess it's just working it all out for our women. The
Yeah.
PCOS we can fix.
Yes.
Let's give them a rundown.
Naturopaths are great. Yep,
Yeah.
naturopaths are great
If
at that.
we do a rundown of endo,
Mhm. Well,
we will.
you're really good to talk on this with endo.
Okay. I didn't wanna,
This
like,
is
breathe all the air.
I know, but Mel is I'm just gonna toot Mel's horn and say that Mel is particularly amazing at helping women with endo. I do
Yeah, I
think you
mean,
got it.
that's why I had to help myself, so I had no choice. With endo, we see painful, heavy periods a lot of the
Mhm,
time. However,
mhm.
the amount of pain does not necessarily reflect the amount of endo. You can have
Yep,
really heavy, painful periods and not have endo. You can have
yep.
no pain and a
Mhm.
normal period and have stage 4 endo. In
Yes.
saying that, we don't grade it much anymore. Like, I don't think that grading system's very helpful, and I see the specialists moving away from it, which I think is great.
Mm, yes.
But with endo, the general picture is heavy, painful bleed, shorter cycles. With PCOS, longer cycles. So they're kind of, opposite to some degree.
Mm,
With endo, we see like the endometrium has adhesions
mhm,
and overgrowths, and that causes
mm.
all kinds of issues. And there are flow-on effects like your PCOS and metabolic syndrome. With endo, there's often other inflammatory conditions and other autoimmune diseases are very
Mhm.
common. There's a lot. Again, whole episode, but I just thought
Mm.
it's worth us saying these are the top two main repro disorders.
Yeah, for sure.
Then we've also got things like adenomyosis, which often goes hand in hand with endo, but
Yeah.
has been more commonly in the last few years found without endo as well.
Mm. Mm.
Adenomyosis, they term it like basically cracking of the uterus wall or bubbling. So rather than the growths and adhesions being on the endometrium, like endometriosis, it's inside the muscular wall. So we
Mm.
see the wall getting bigger and thicker and fatter and the
Mm.
uterus actually expanding in size.
And unlike endo, they can go in and find it and cut it out and remove it. They can't do that with adenomyosis. And
Well, you
this is
can't
where the
cut the
problem
inside of your
lies.
uterus wall out,
No.
Yeah.
So, whilst we can remove endo, we can't do that. And so this is where it, does cause a lot of women a lot of problems. But I do think there's definitely a place where naturopathy can really help and herbal medicine can make some big
I
differences.
can slow it down. I
Mm,
know that I'm so confident we could slow it down. We can prevent it
yeah.
getting worse. I
Mm,
can't fix what's there.
yeah.
We can't always fix what's there already, but certainly with adenomyosis, you will often have really heavy flooding, clotting bleeds. That'll be a very common symptom.
Yeah. I have both, just so you all know. I
Me
have
too. Well, I did.
endometriosis and adenomyosis. And with my adenomyosis, I had that really heavy, clotty picture myself, and I have really been able to kind of rein it in. And it's
Hmm.
much more under control now. And it doesn't really kind of like interfere with my life the way that it used to. I think there's always a certain part to some degree where your periods can be more problematic when you do have adenomyosis in there. Because, like we said, it's not like you could just kind of go and remove it.
Yeah.
But, like Mel said, I do think there is a lot we can do to try and rein it in. And we have some really beautiful herbs that work on your uterus. And I think it's just really important just to kind of put that out there that there is help available. And, Mel and I get it, because we've been there ourselves. We know, and I think I often get women wanting to book in with Mel or myself because we both
Yeah.
have had it, and so we get it. And I feel like women always, especially, when you go to doctors and they don't get it and they just dismiss you. So I think when you kind of come and meet with a practitioner that has had it themselves, they kind of, you just, you're in a safe space.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is dismissed until and if you want kids, because there's not
Yeah.
a whole lot of options, which brings us to our little chat on the pill.
Uh, Yes.
So
Yeah.
what does the pill actually do? Whose bleed
Yeah.
are we
So
having?
okay, it's so important to understand as a woman, what does a pill actually do? Because so often you'll go to the doctor because your periods aren't great, and the doctor will say, I'm going to regulate your cycle by putting you on the pill. Now, let me just put it out there. This is not what the pill does. The pill is shutting down and suppressing ovulation. So your hormones are flatlined. You are not having a proper period. When you have those sugar pills, you are having a withdrawal bleed. It is not a period. It is really important to understand that. So women all the time will be like, oh, but my period's regular because I'm on the pill. No, no, it is not, because you are not having a proper period. So, this is where some of those new medications that are coming out don't actually have the sugar pills because it's not needed. The sugar pills were invented in the beginning. The original pills that came out didn't have sugar pills, but they put the sugar pills in there so that women could feel like they were having a normal period because it was weird to not have one. So it was just the pharmaceutical companies doing it. It had nothing to do with whether you needed it or whether you needed to shed the lining. Because if you're not ovulating, your lining is never thickening. So you don't need to then shed it. And I think it's really important to understand that as well. Do you agree?
So important, and I think that that's gonna be quite, shocking and maybe unnerving for a lot of women
Yeah.
because, I see it on our patients' faces when we do explain what's going on. And
Yeah.
in the doctor's defense, if I can just for a second, that's all they've got.
Yeah.
Coming
It's
back to what you
it's
were
the
saying at the
the
start,
one gun.
that's it. That's all they've got. And it is the treatment that they're gonna opt for until you want babies. Our reproductively, we are here to procreate. That's what females are here for, nothing else. No career, you know, no house, no nothing. Like, we're just here
Of
to
course
have
not.
babies and keep this life, human life going. But if you don't want a baby, then that's going to be the option from the doctor. That's it. There's no other, they don't have another option. We are spoilt for choice. We can do so many different things.
So
Um,
many.
I'm often like, My gosh, how many things can like I do at once? I got to filter it. I got to put the priorities in because we are spoiled for choice to fix this stuff. But at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
you're still going to have your cycle with herbs and supplements. You're still going to have your rhythm. You're still going to have your bleed. It's all
Yeah.
yours. It's not.
And your hormones, can I just say, your
Mhm.
hormones that you have every day over the course of the month make up part of who you are. And I can't even tell you how many women that I've seen in their mid 20s that have been on the pill for a decade, right? So since they were 16 or 17, they feel like they don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of identity. They've got no sex drive, right? And
Mhm.
they think something is wrong with them, and I'm like, oh no, my dear, it is because you don't have your hormones switched on. And that is such an essential part of who you are. And I think that's so important to talk about and to honor. That's why I'm so passionate about women not being on the pill, because I want you to experience that inner nature of who you're supposed to be. And we're driven by our hormones in a really powerful way, not in
Yeah.
a, oh, we're so emotional, gosh, the drama of the woman. No, our hormones are powerful. And that's a really powerful nature in ourselves.
And
And
like
I
we're
just think,
pro-choice. We're
for sure.
pro-choice, but we are pro-education and information. So we
Yes.
just want our women to know exactly what's going on.
And I think
That's
there's so many
your
women
body.
where we've spoken to about this and we've explained it and they've gone, like, no one ever explained that to me. And also, unfortunately, women get put on the pill when they're 11, 12, 13 years old and they've had their periods and hormones switched on for a hot minute and then they just switch it off again. And it's really hard to hear that.
There's a time and a place as well. Like, having endo as a very young girl was horrific. I got to tell you. And I had, I don't know, the better part of a decade on the pill before I became a
Mm,
naturopath. And I, that saved my life. I was so sick. I was anemic, like there's so many considerations. You have to do
mm,
what's right for you.
yeah,
But no, obviously when I'm 11 going on the pill, I don't know. I don't know. But as a mum
totally.
now, I know for my daughter, like,
Yeah,
and we
I
can make
know.
that informed choice for her
Yeah.
because it's likely
And
she will have endo as well.
we can also support young girls. We can support preteens, teens. It doesn't
Definitely.
have to be that you need to wait until you're an adult.
Yeah.
We have, an amazing pediatric naturopath on our team, Lainey, and just the way that we can support, like, and don't be stressed to think that, oh, they won't take these disgusting camps. We have so many tools in our toolkit. We're all
Yeah.
over
We
this.
got all kinds of tricks.
We have so much up our sleeves to be able to help. That's what Mel and I are saying is we
Mm.
literally have that many different tools. We've got something that's right for you to help bring you back in
And
balance no matter what.
I always say to my girls, like, I can do everything that pill can do except for contraception. However, when you have a
Mm,
regular,
mhm,
beautiful menstrual cycle, I can tell you, you'll be able to tell you exactly when you're ovulating. And then
yeah.
we can plan, sex
Mm,
around that if you don't want to have a
mhm,
bubba yet. But if you know
mhm,
when you're ovulating, that's your most powerful tool in contraception anyway. So
mm.
we can do everything else. Like, there's not much we don't have something for.
Yeah. So I think, just kind of coming back to some of the stuff that we spoke about, and I think, some of the stuff that can sort of impact your, hormones, I think it's really
Mm,
important to look at, the stress that's in your life, look at the food that you're eating, look at what's going on in your environment, and take all that stuff into consideration as well.
definitely.
Because often, sorry, I was just going to say
Fine.
what I also have noticed, and I've noticed this a bit recently. I've been thinking a bit about this with
Mm,
some of my clients. It's funny, like the more people I see, sometimes I see these patterns, and I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh, it's just my little brain is just going a million miles an hour all the time." But one thing I notice
Nervous
is
system.
I know, I know. This is why I have to work so hard on it because it is tiring up there. One thing I do notice is I feel like if you were someone that's always had a tendency to be a bit irregular with your
Mm,
menstrual cycle, I feel like these women are more susceptible to influences of stress,
mm,
diet not being so great, exercise or whatever, and their hormones just want to go play hide and seek at the drop of a hat.
yeah.
Whereas I feel like when I have other women that have a really rock solid, everyone kind of has their thing, right? But if you're a woman that has a rock solid standard, army regimented period, you could throw a bomb at you and you'll still have a period.
Mm,
I was walking with one of my clients and, she's a tendency to have really irregular periods. And we realized one of the sources of her, significant stress is she had a very difficult upbringing, really
mm,
difficult. And we noticed that whenever she would get back in contact with her mum or her mum would reach out, her nervous system would get shot and her periods would disappear. And, we got her periods really good. And then she said to me on one of our follow-ups we had a little while ago, she was like, "Oh, Jamie," she's like, "I had a really big incident with my family, with my mother." And she's like, "I feel like it's not going to be good for my periods." And I'm like, "That's okay. That's okay. No problem. Well, we've got you on the herbs. We know what we're doing." And sure enough, her periods disappeared again.
mm.
But they came back because we knew what to do. But she
Yeah.
it's just that's what happens with
It's a
her,
safety response. It's a
Yeah.
safety response. Like, nobody wants to bring a baby up if your mum is wreaking havoc on your life. That's not a good
Yeah.
situation. And
Yeah.
sorry, you don't have to have a baby, but it does your body's super primitive like that. Like I said, we're here to
Mm,
procreate.
yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
all it thinks it's going to
Yeah.
do. Um, the other thing is, like with the pill, if you consider that, this is a fifth vital sign and there's only 5, so we lose that, that's
Mm,
going to have a huge effect, like vice versa,
yeah.
right? All of this stuff is affecting our period. If we completely cut that huge thing out of our life, I think, of course, it's going to affect everything else. You might find that you get stressed easier, you're more anxious. I do see
Mm,
that in a lot of my patients on the pill, and I have a lot of patients on the pill, on the
yeah.
marina, on
Mm,
the rod, like all kinds of things. We can work with
mm,
everything, but there is a heightened anxiety for some of them. There is more bloating. There's these symptoms that can happen when we're not
mm.
having a regular bleed.
I think we need to do a whole episode on different types of contraception and the
That'd be
impact that
good.
has on the body.
That'd be good. Well, let's
Because I
do
think
it.
this is just such a big topic. And, we haven't even touched on the marina. We haven't touched on the
Yeah.
rod. Like, these are big things and they do cause lots of big impacts on the body.
Yeah.
So I reckon we need a whole
We'll do it.
episode just
We'll
to
do it
break
for you.
that down. Yeah, I think we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll
That'd be
pencil
good.
that into the
Awesome.
schedule.
But
Okay, so
that wraps us up
any
for,
last yeah, any
well,
last
I think
thoughts,
it's episode
Mel?
4. I think that's
Is
it.
there
I
any
think,
last thoughts you've got? You all good?
I do love, using your period to know yourself, and that's part of that vital
Mm,
sign theory as
yeah,
well. You know, getting
absolutely.
getting to be friends with it, like, it's not your enemy. If we make it that lovely experience, then it shouldn't be a stressful, awful kind of event.
I mean, ovulation should be where you should be feeling a little something, something. Like, that's a fun
Yeah.
time. She is a
Not
fun
feeling pain.
girl.
Mhm.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So we
Ideal.
thank
Yeah.
you so much, everybody, for joining us
Thanks for listening
again
in.
on this lovely episode. And we will talk to you soon. Talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for being here with us today. If something in this episode resonated, just know there's always a way to explore it further and support your body the way it needs. You can find out more by going to the website nourishingapothecary.com or reach out if you're ready for more personalised care. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep listening to your body.